Hello, welcome back. We have a fun one to talk about today. It's called The Incredible Two-Headed Transplant. This movie was put out by AIP and directed by Anthony Lanza. Before this movie, Anthony Lanza did this one, The Glory Stompers. The Glory Stompers was a biker gang film. These were popular in the late 60s and beyond, but they got really popular in the late 60s, and AIP put a bunch of them out, just like this one. In this one particularly, Dennis Hopper, who was in lots of movies after this, like Waterworld and Super Mario Brothers and Blue Velvet and what was that one with Keanu Reeves? Speed, and tons of other movies. This was when he was really young. He was a leader of a biker gang. They beat a guy almost to death, abduct the girlfriend, decide to sell her to Mexicans. It's pretty crazy, pretty exciting. Not like super well directed or anything like that, and I actually read that Dennis Hopper was poorly behaved on set and that Anthony Lanza actually quit, and then Dennis Hopper actually directed the rest on his own. But anyway, Anthony Lanza's second film was The Incredible Two-Headed Transplant, and this one features Bruce Dern as a Dr. Frankenstein type character. Here's a look at Bruce Dern. Now, Bruce Dern is becoming one of my favorite actors. He was in a bunch of biker gang movies just like Dennis Hopper. In fact, actually I don't know if they were in any together, but I believe they were. I haven't watched all of them yet, but I did watch a bunch of old Bruce Dern roles, including his role in the Clint Eastwood movie Hang 'em High, which was awesome. Bruce Dern had a really small role in that. He was just one of the outlaws that Clint Eastwood ends up capturing and hanging. Bruce Dern was also in another Western. Here he is. This one was called Support Your Local Sheriff. I haven't watched a ton of Westerns, maybe like 6 or 7 or 8 altogether. But from this time period, I've only seen a few. And this one was actually a Western comedy, and I liked it a surprising amount. It was really good. Bruce Dern is captured by the sheriff and put in a jail with no bars and no windows, no bars on the windows or the gate. So he could have just walked out, but he gets manipulated and intimidated into staying in there. So this movie was good. So anyway, let's talk about The Incredible Two-Headed Transplant. This is basically Frankenstein, okay? But the difference is, instead of putting a whole bunch of dead body parts together, the mad scientist, who is Bruce Dern, is putting a head of a dead person, or a person who has just freshly died, onto the body of a living person. Actually, the living person was played by John Bloom, and this was his first movie credit. We talked about John Bloom when we discussed Frankenstein versus Dracula and Brain of Blood. Those are both Al Adamson movies, and they came out the same year as this, except actually a little bit later. This one came out first. John Bloom was 7 feet 4 inches tall, and became known for playing monsters. He played actually Frankenstein's monster in Frankenstein versus Dracula, and he played a character named Gore, which we talked about in Brain of Blood, and basically a world leader's brain gets put into Gore's body in Brain of Blood. So all three of them are very Frankenstein-ish, which one of them literally is Frankenstein. So basically, what are the differences? Well, the main giant body, John Bloom's body, is like a guy who was traumatized as a kid. I think he got trapped in a mine. I think that's the story. He got trapped in a mine. And so then his brain never developed beyond a child's brain. So he's this giant kid, basically, in this giant adult body. and there's a maniacal mass killer on the loose in Santa Clarita, California, and the killer shows up and tries to rape Bruce Dern's wife, and ends up getting shot. They shoot. Bruce Dern shoots him in the back, and then Bruce Dern and his assistant, who is actually the one who's like kind of in control, his assistant is an older scientist who apparently has bad hands. He wears like these white gloves, like basically like Mickey Mouse gloves the whole time. He never takes them off, but supposedly his hands don't work very well. This reminds me of Vincent Price's character in House of Wax when he gets caught in that fire. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think I have things mixed up, but he wears these gloves because he has bad hands, so he gets this other guy to like create the wax sculptures or something like that. I could be off on that. But anyway, he wears these gloves to indicate that his hands don't work properly or whatever, even though he uses them throughout the movie to open doors and shoot guns and all sorts of other things. But anyway, they ended up shooting this killer, and they had previously been grafting extra heads onto animals, including a snake, a monkey. What else? There's like a two-headed fox on this poster and a two-headed like bobcat, although I don't think those are in the movie. But they definitely had a two-headed monkey in the movie, which I'm surprised they didn't put on the poster. But anyway, they decided to make a two-headed human, and then, of course, the maniacal killer brain kind of takes over the body and kind of holds John Bloom's head hostage. And then you have this monster going around killing people, including some biker gang members. So they got to squeeze that in there. I forgot to mention Bruce Dern was in a few biker gang movies where he was the leader, including Rebel Rousers, which also had Jack Nicholson and Harry Dean Stanton as gang members, and Bruce Dern was the leader. So that was before Jack Nicholson like really hit it as a big actor. Anyway, you got this giant two-headed monster running amok. It's pretty exciting. It's a very low-budget movie. I read that Bruce Dern said he never even got paid for it. I'm surprised he took this part because this came out in 1971, and he had been in these bigger movies. Like Hang 'em High was like this giant successful movie, and it's emphasized today because you can watch Hang 'em High and support your local sheriff, and this other movie I watched called Castle Keep in stunning HD today, whereas this movie, it has not been remastered at all. It's really gritty. It's almost a little bit blurry. It's on Hoopla and Tubi and Pluto, and it's the same quality on all of those. And the audio is like muffled, and like the script is not very strong. There's not any really good dialogue, and Bruce Dern did a really good job in some of these other movies, and he's like okay in this, but I'm pretty sure it's kind of the fault of the director and the writer, because I don't think they gave him that much to work with. He's not bad in it. But that being said, a lot of other people that have rated this movie have rated it extremely poorly, but I thought it was pretty fun. Kind of like, it felt like those other Al Adamson movies to me, or like a Herschel Gordon Lewis movie without all the gore. It's just like an old, gritty, low-budget, late 60s feel horror movie that came out in 1971. It's got the whole Frankenstein type thing. Obviously, that stuff was very popular in the 60s. Monsters and vampires were very popular in the 60s, and this is still kind of holding on to that. Although I don't know of another two-headed monster movie that came before this. Maybe there is one. Not counting like fantasy adventure films like, you know, with like Roman monsters and stuff like that. I think there's probably a two-headed monster that appears for a scene or two in a few of those old movies, which were not that old, mainly the 60s, but where I don't know of a major two-headed monster movie that came out before this. So it's kind of unique for its time, in my opinion. Both of the heads talk, have their own personality. There's even scenes where this monster is killing people, but the original head of John Bloom is crying while the other head is laughing. And you can see here on the poster it says, one brain wants to love, one brain wants to kill. Well, I'm not really sure that any of the brains want to love, maybe, but it definitely doesn't. One wants to kill and the other one doesn't. Overall, I thought this movie was very enjoyable. I give it a 7 out of 10. If you enjoy low-budget 60s horror movies, I would watch this, even though it's not from the 60s. If you enjoy stuff by Herschel Gordon Lewis or Al Adamson, I would watch this. Actually, the director, Anthony Lanza, actually was the editor on an old Steckler movie, and we talked about Steckler very recently. He did The Trooper. So they actually worked together, and this is all really ultra low budget, ultra independent stuff. AIP put it out, like distributed it, but they didn't produce it. I'm pretty sure they purchased it and then distributed it, if I'm not mistaken. So this movie does not get much love, but I think it deserves it. Oh, I should also mention Casem is in it. If you're a little bit older, you remember Casem as like the top 40 radio guy. And I just learned this, but Casem also played Shaggy in Scooby-Doo, in like the classic Scooby-Doo, and voiced Shaggy for all those classic TV episodes and for like over a dozen Scooby-Doo movies. So Casem is in this before he was ever Shaggy, actually I think he started doing Top 40 Radio in 1970, so that was right when he was getting started with that. But in this movie, he's just a supporting character who doesn't do that much, but he is in it. And I think he was in one of the biker movies I watched too. So it's a good one. It's up for free on Tubi or Pluto. Those are free apps that you can watch movies on. I would say go watch this on there, because then they'll put more stuff like this on there so that I can watch it and review it. Don't believe the hate that it gets. It's pretty fun. All right, see you next time.